Test one. Whoa, now we're hot. Now we're hot. Now we're not hot anymore. We were hot, then we were not hot. Story of my life. Isn't that right? Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see everybody here this morning. And, there was, it's always funny. I was just in another class down there, and they were like, it's 9 o'clock. Where is everybody? I'm like, this is our culture. We roll in about 9:10. That's about when we get started. That's okay. I'm just happy you're here. We're plodding through the Gospel of Matthew. If you haven't been with us, that's what we've been doing, taking it piece by piece and taking our time. We're in Matthew 16 this morning. We're going to be ending 16, going into 17. And when we left, we looked at starting in about verse 21 was the last place we were, as Jesus says, look, we're going to go to Jerusalem, and when we get there, they're going to beat me, and they're going to torture me, and they're going to kill me. And Peter takes him aside and says, Jesus, don't talk like that. That's not how Messiahs talk. That's not how this is supposed to go. You need to settle down and stop talking like that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You don't have your mind on the things of God, but on the things of men. And that's where we left off last time. And then it picks up in verse 24. Because expounding on that, then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Now, we on this side of the cross don't understand the magnitude of that statement, because the cross to us is different than it was to them. We have, people have crosses tattooed on their body. They wear cross jewelry. They have cross T-shirts. It's a thing. Then nobody would have dreamed of wearing a T-shirt or having it a necklace. And I tried to find anything. There's not really even anything in our society that is applicable, or the old electric chair is the closest I think I can come to it, and even that is still not the same. Because the cross was about shame. It was about humiliation. It was about the worst thing that could happen to an individual, period. And so for somebody to say, if you want to be my disciple, you're going to have to go to a cross. And now you hear Christians say, well, I have a pain in my thigh, and that's just the cross I have to bear. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about, you got to die. If you saw somebody taking up their cross, you could be almost 100% certain that was the last time you were going to see that person alive, period. Because if they took up a cross, that meant they were going to be nailed to that piece of wood. There was no doubt. The Romans were really, really good at killing people. And that's why they ruled the world. And so when Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me, that's a heavy statement. That would have hit them really, really hard, because he doesn't just say you're going to have to die. He says you're going to be humiliated, you're going to be shamed, you're going to be judged and condemned and ostracized and whatever other words you want to put in there. And then he doubles down in 25. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And so he sets up this dichotomy of the world versus the soul. And it's like, there's your choices. You can choose the world, or you can choose your soul, but you can't choose both. And that's... How is this different from what a lot of churches and Christianity teaches today? Because to me, it looks very, very different. Everything becomes rosy, right? If you become a Christian, everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be taken care of and the Lord's just going to bless you. And if you're just not blessed, it's just because you're not believing enough. You just need to believe it and receive it. But that's not what Jesus teaches. Jesus says if you're going to follow me, you're going to be shamed and humiliated and cast out and murdered. Now, that's not a very good recruit. If you want to save your life, you're going to have to lose it. And if you want to follow me, you're going to have to deny yourself and give up everything, including your life. Now, but then it gets weird. Look at 27. For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Okay, now Jesus, hang on. Because you just said that to be your disciple, I have to give up myself. There's, that I can't do this on my own, on my own merits, right? But then in the next breath, you say, when you come, you're going to judge me based on what I do. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that it's not about what we do, but it is about what we do. So what's he saying here? Because the Son of Man is going to return in his glory, and each one's going to be rewarded according to what they have done. But in almost every other place where he talks about it, it's not about what you do. There's nothing you can do to earn salvation. That has to come through faith. And so that's a doing. Absolutely. And that's the problem with these verses when we pull them out. We were talking last week about cafeteria style religion and how you go through and pick and choose this and that and that and this. And when we go through and pull a verse out and pull it out of context, we lose what it means. Because he's not saying that he's going to come back and judge you based on how many times you came to church or whatever qualifier you want to put on there. He's going to come back and judge you based on whether you gave up your life or not. That's the do. That's the thing. You're going to have to give it up. And if you're willing to give it up, if that's the thing you do, then that's what you're going to be rewarded for. And then we keep getting weirder in 28. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And wait, okay, so does that mean that they would see Christ's return before they died? Does that mean that somehow Peter and James and John are still alive? Because we haven't seen Jesus return. So what does that mean? Anybody want to jump in there? Jason.
I think it means kind of like someone's on their deathbed, they suddenly accept Christ before, when they hadn't done that before. To me, that's what it's talking about. Like accepting Christ at the very last minute.
Absolutely. I buy that. Well, tell me the traditional stand. The traditional stand was equating the kingdom with the church.
So a lot of people were from here, would be still alive.
Right.
When Peter preached the first sermon.
Okay. That is the traditional stand. I think it comes down to an understanding of kingdom. Because if we see the kingdom as being the church, then yeah, that makes sense. If we see the kingdom because I think a better interpretation of 28 would be, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man come into his kingdom. Coming into his kingdom. Does that make sense? And so it's about the cross for Jesus. That's the context of what he's talking about. This whole section is about taking up your cross and dying, and how you're going to have to give up your life to find it. And then he's connecting it. That's where he started, was that I'm going to be killed and raised. And that's where he's connecting it to here. When I come into my kingdom, is when I'm going to be killed and raised. And so when you're going to see the kingdom come in your lifetime, because the kingdom is both and this makes sense. It's like when I graduated college in May of 97. In May of 90, I'm not that old. In May of 97, I graduated college, and I walked across the stage, and they handed me the little folder, and that little folder was empty, because I still had one PE class that I had not taken. I had 3 credit hours of PE that I had to do. I had a job lined up. I had everything. I walked across the stage. They did the thing and shook the hand, and they gave me but until I finished that Maymester class, that 3 hours of PE, it was pickleball, by the way. Yeah, it gets better. But until I finished that, I wasn't officially graduated. But it was both and. I walked across and I was graduated, but I wasn't really graduated. Does that make sense? It's almost like when you get engaged, right? You're married, but you're not married. I mean, it's there, but it's not there. It's and I don't know. Maybe y'all can think of better illustrations than these. This is just what popped off the top of my head. But it's both and. It's yes, yes, it's now, but yes, it's also to come. And so the kingdom comes when Christ is resurrected and glorified, but the kingdom's also going to come when Christ returns with the angels, like he's talking about. You with me on that? Very all over the place, but I apologize. So now we're in 17. We finished the chapter. Woohoo! And this is where it's going to get real good, right? Because this is the turning point for Matthew's gospel. From this point, this is the climax, right? From here, we're going to start. Well, this is probably not the climax, but this is the turning point. From here, he starts resolutely going to Jerusalem. From here, it's all about he's headed to the cross. He's talked about it. He's told them it's coming. Now in 17, he's going to be transfigured, and from that point on, him, Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up to a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking to Jesus. Now stop, because there are so many questions. Because this is like, whoa. First of all, why do you think Jesus just took 3 apostles? And why these 3? Now, this is one of those why do you think questions, so you can't be wrong. Evan, you got a hand up? According to Peter, it was what? Oh, because he's really good pitching a tent. I got you. Okay. Why these 3? Jerry? Good. Yeah. Right. And so we all have inner circles, and we can look at our lives and say, well, this is my inner circle, and then there's this group and this group and this group and going on out. And Jesus wasn't any different. He had his closest ones, and then going out from there. And so I buy that. I buy that. Trying to decide how Bible nerd I want to get on you. Okay, well, let's go. James and John are identified as the sons of Zebedee. The sons of thunder, that's their nickname. But the sons of Zebedee, that's their heritage. We learned that in chapter 4, verse 21. On going on from thence, he saw the other 2, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in the ship with Zebedee their father. Now, if you skip to the end of Matthew in chapter 27, standing at the foot of the cross with Jesus' mother was the mother of Zebedee's children. Chapter 27, verse 56. Among which was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. Okay, you with me so far? So James and John are Zebedee's kids, and standing at the foot of the cross, according to Matthew, is Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. 3 women, right? Now jump back over to Mark 15, verse 40. There were also women looking on from afar, still describing the women at the cross. Mark says, among whom was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less and Joseph, and Salome. You with me? 3 women. 3 women in Matthew was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and Mary the mother of Zebedee's children. You with me? Mark names Mary the mother of Zebedee's children Salome. You with me so far? Jesus' mother is there. We'll get there. Because then you go to John 19, verse 25. Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. I know, right? It's a popular name. Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. So now we know who those women are, right? Jesus' mother is a given in Matthew and Mark. They don't even talk about her because they assume you know she's there. So you got Mary Magdalene. They all 3 talk about Mary Magdalene. Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, is talked about in Matthew and Mark, and she is the wife of Cleophas in John, right? And Salome, his mother's sister. Salome, his mother's sister, the mother of Zebedee's children. James and John were Jesus' cousins. You with me on this? So now it makes a lot more sense when we get to the place later where James and John's mama's going to come up and go, now you're going to put them on your right hand, right? You're going to take care of your cousins when you come into your kingdom. That makes a lot more sense. You used to read that and you're like, this woman, I mean, how does she get the gall to feel like she has the ability to ask this? Well, she's his aunt. And she said, look here, you need to take care of your family, okay? I'm believing in this, but so it makes a little more sense now, some of the tight-knit. Are you with me? That I told you I was going to Bible nerd out on you, so just take that for what it's worth. But here's my next question. Because Matthew writes this, how did they know? How did they know that the 2 figures that appeared are Moses and Elijah? Because they'd never seen pictures of Moses and Elijah. There was no comic books or movies or TV shows or books or anything that had pictures of Moses and Elijah. They don't know what Moses and Elijah looked like, but they know that Moses and Elijah are appearing. How do you think they knew? It was revealed to them, Luana says. That's good. That's good. Or maybe Jesus told them later. I mean, they weren't writing this down as it happened. It wasn't like, hang on, Jesus, don't say, hey, can you say that again? Because I missed it. He wrote, this was written much, much later, right? And so by that time, they knew who it was that Jesus was talking to. Why only Moses and Elijah? There you go. The law and the prophets. Whenever you hear somebody, especially Jewish leaders, even Jesus, talk about the Jewish scriptures, he would say the law and the prophets. Remember when he says, love your neighbor, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind, love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 hinge all the law and the prophets. That's the Bible. That's what he meant. When he says the law and the prophets, he's saying the whole Bible. The whole Bible is the law and the prophets. And Moses was the law, and Elijah was the prophets. And so you've got both of them there, the law and the prophets, the entirety of Scripture, of the Bible as they knew it, there with Jesus. What do you think they were talking about? Now we're totally speculating. There's nothing in here that tells us. There's no way of knowing. What do you think they were talking about? Okay, I buy that. That Miss Pat said that they were encouraging him. I buy that. I think they would both have something to say in that regard. Anybody else? I mean, this is totally speculation and opinion, so whatever you got. Jason, then Dick.
I don't think they were talking very long. Verse 5, it talks about how who I am well pleased.
Yeah, they didn't talk very long. Okay, I buy that. Dick? Fulfillment. Tell me what you mean by that. They knew what was going to happen. They believed it was going to happen. Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, that he is the fulfillment of all the law and the prophets. I buy that. That makes sense. Anybody else want to speculate? Now's your chance. That we don't have anything. We don't know anything other than what we have. I've got to get back because I lost my place. And then Peter, you got to love Peter. Peter is just like overwhelmed, right? This is Peter. For Peter, this is the whole, Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is all his heroes in one place. And he just can't control himself, right? He just, Lord, it's good for us to be here. I tell you what, we're going to erect tabernacles. Now, when he's erecting tabernacles, he's not just talking about pitching tents. What's he talking about? He's talking about making places of worship, right? We're going to erect tabernacle, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah, and we'll just worship right here. And this is a sacred place, and we're just going to stay right here. Cody. Absolutely. And he still falls back. but yeah, that's part of why he was there, because he is going to be one of the leaders, and Jesus knows that going forward, even though Peter doesn't know that. And so he's running off at the mouth, and that's when verse 5 comes down. Now, you ever been called out in class? The teacher says, that's enough of that. That's what happens. Basically, Peter's running off at the mouth talking about we're just going to pitch a bunch of tents here and make a place of worship. And God says, this one's my son. Shut up and listen to him. Now, that's the Jeff paraphrase version. But that's verse, Jason read it just a second ago. We'll start at 4. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it's good that we're here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. This with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise, have no fear. When they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Can you imagine having an experience like this? I mean, you're on a mountaintop, and first of all, Jesus starts just glowing. And then there's these other guys that appear that are talking to him, and so then you're freaking out and you want to worship, and then God speaks to you from a cloud. I mean, that's why they fall down on their face, because usually when God speaks to people, it's not a good thing. And so that Jesus says, don't be afraid. It's okay. And then they lift up their heads and it's all back to normal.
It's no wonder these 3 guys gave their lives.
Right?
What have they witnessed?
All the things that they've seen, all the things that they've experienced. I mean, this experience alone, you got to know that I mean, how do you they somehow. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, Tell no one the vision. He answered, Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist, that John the Baptist was Elijah, the voice of one calling in the wilderness, that he had already come to restore all things. And so then they get to the bottom of the mountain. And when they came to the crowd, verse 14, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire and often into the water, and I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. I think we see the humanity of Jesus right here. Because just like the rest of us, you ever gone from the mountaintop experience back to the real world? You know what I'm talking about? You come back from the mission trip, or you come back from camp, or you come back from the retreat, or just an amazing church service where your spirit is really touched and you're really on this spiritual high, and then you go back to Monday, right? And you're like, oh, how long do I have to do this? I think you see the humanity of Jesus coming out here. I think he's because he comes down the mountain. He's just had this mountaintop experience. Moses and Elijah, transfigured and glowing, voice of God speaking from a cloud. And he gets down to the bottom, and this dude, we're right back to the same old thing. I brought him, and I brought my son who's plagued with this demon, and he keeps having this stuff happen to him, and your disciples couldn't do anything about it. And Jesus is like, oh, how long do I have to put up with you people? Now, that, again, Jeff paraphrased version. That's not what he says, but that's the sentiment, right? I don't think he's mad at the guy or even the disciples. I think it's just like, I was so close to home just a minute ago. How long do I have to keep doing this? I'm ready to go home. I'm tired of it. And who the disciples were. Was it the other 9 that were left, apostles? Or was it, they don't call them apostles. Was it, because a lot of times it'll defer to disciples as the group that followed Jesus. There were a lot more that weren't the 12. And so we don't know. The disciples, there was a group of disciples. And they couldn't do anything to heal this boy. Because Jesus says why? Why couldn't they do anything to heal this boy? Because of their lack of faith. Now, can you imagine everything? Take the transfiguration out, because those disciples didn't see that, all right? But everything else that they've seen, everything else that they've experienced, they've been a part of miraculous feedings, and they've seen all these healings and walking on water and just all this stuff, and they still don't get it. They still don't get it. And if you're Jesus, that's got to be at some point you go, how long do I have to do this? Yeah, Chris? Right. Yes, I think you're right. I think corrupt is a bad, and faithless, adulterous is one translation that's used there, and that's a common biblical term because the people who aren't faithful to God and are pursuing idols and whatnot. Evan, you had your hand up. Uh-huh. we can, that's Bible nerd stuff, and we can get into that. That's but Evan does make the point. There's no verse 21 here that it goes from 20 to 22 because the this kind can only come out by prayer and fasting, and there's probably, we can get into manuscripts and this one had that and that one had this, and we're not going to do that because that's not the purpose of our study. But you can review that on your own, and you'll find that they've made changes sometimes because as archaeologists and scholars find more and more stuff, more and more versions of the Gospels going back earlier and earlier, they find things that had been, I mean, this is not as further back. There are stockpiles of scrolls and fragments and stuff and new stuff all the time. But because translation, especially for some of these, I mean, you can't even touch these things without them falling apart. And so getting in there and getting the information and getting it translated correctly is a labor. I mean, they'll work 10 years on one fragment. And so that's why, we still have tons of stuff that archaeologists have found that hasn't even been translated yet, that hasn't even been examined yet. It's just stored because they're trying to get to it. And so as archaeologists, no, it's okay. I was rabbit trailing. They couldn't figure out how. And so, it's easy for us to sit in judgment of these guys and go, well, look, they just didn't have enough faith. But we're the same way. I mean, we'll have somebody, we're big, give them peace and comfort. And because we're scared. We don't have the faith to really ask God to do that because we're not sure if he actually will, and we're scared how that's going to impact my faith if he says no. And so there's a lot of faithlessness that we exhibit even today, and it's easy for us to look at these guys and go, oh, well, look at them and their lack of faith. But I mean, we're not any better. I'm not saying we're worse. I'm saying we're not any better. And ask, why couldn't we drive it out? And he replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Now, have you ever seen a mustard seed? I almost brought such y'all, but I hadn't moved any mountains. And so mine is like microscopic, I guess.
Take lessons from our children. They have so much faith that sometimes we have to say, now wait a minute. And that happened with my kids.
Uh-huh.
One day in Houston, it snowed a little bit, okay? And the kids were so excited, they made a few snowballs and all that. And the next day or so, it's not, and the oldest one said, now listen, this is how we can get it to snow again. We would pray and ask God to make it snow again.
I love it.
And I turned around and I said, now wait a minute, it's 72 degrees out there.
Right.
You know how the weather is.
Yes.
But they prayed anyway.
Yeah.
And the next day, some more snow.
and amazingly, I mean, is it any doubt that Jesus says, unless you have faith like little children? Absolutely. I can't restate that for the folks at home. I think what I want to leave on, we got about 5 minutes left, but is how can I? Well, Mark's version is a little bit different. If you turn over to Mark, hang on, now I've lost it. If you turn over to Mark's version, he tells the same story in chapter 9, I believe it is. Let me see if I can pull it up. Thank you. See there? I was right. I just needed to be right. Mark 9. Yeah, starting at verse 14. And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd. For he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And he answered them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for the one who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. And so that's Mark's version of the same story. As I read this, I'm thinking of my own little microscopic, minuscule faith. And I want to know, how do I change that? And I think the answer is by praying the same prayer that this father prays. What does he say? Verse 24 of Mark 9. I do believe, help my unbelief. And I don't know about you, but I feel him, right? Because I feel the same way. I do believe, help my unbelief. I believe, I have faith. But obviously, I'm not moving any mountains, so I have that strengthened is to bring it to Jesus. I can't make myself more full of faith. There we go. All right. People at home, we had technical difficulties. I apologize. We're back again. I do believe, help my unbelief. That's where we all live, right? Cody, you had your hand up just a second ago, and I was rattling on. Uh-huh. Put your full faith into it. You can do anything you want if you put your heart into it. That's what we're always told growing up. I'm restating for the folks at home, and that's the same thing with being a disciple. That's what faith is about putting my whole heart into it. That's where we're going to stop because we're out of time. But there's a lot that is to come, and so I want you to go ahead and you can be reading ahead. We will we're in 17 and we've gone through we're going to start again and in 20 what is it 22 is where we're going to pick up, and Jesus is going to once again tell them that he's going to die. This time they're going to hear him a little bit better. And then next week we're going to talk about death and taxes, because that's what happens next. Death and taxes. That's what's next in chapter 17. So we're out of time. Take a few minutes. Take care of your business, fellowship. And